virtually. We'll be having breakout groups virtually. So we'll be doing a lot more listening, and you will be doing a lot more talking. But before we begin the process, we're just going to go over a couple of items. Everybody can, I guess, can be seen. You can see how many folks are on. It's a family affair. But again, I just want to say thank you again for joining us. Before we move on, I first would like to introduce, of course, always our partner, NYCHA, represented by Ian Lundy. Ian, please feel free to begin.
Thanks so much, Yasmin. Really appreciate it. And as she just mentioned, I really want to emphasize that the Linden team you're hearing, the Stanley Avenue Preservation team you're hearing from today is a partner of NYCHA's. NYCHA really remains very involved in this process. And I just wanted to start this meeting off by first thanking everyone for making the time to be here tonight. A successful conversion and a successful reinvestment in Linden houses is really dependent on feedback from you. You know these sites better than any of us could. So the feedback you give, the questions you provide, your attendance here tonight, that is what really is the key to success here. So I want to start by just thanking everyone for making the time to join us tonight. I also, for those of you who weren't able to make some of our previous meetings that were kind of just with NYCHA and residents, I do want to give everyone some background on how we got here today, who this team is, and what the program they're talking about is, how they're intending to pay for a lot of the design improvements that we're going to talk about this evening. So the starting point for this is that Linden Houses is a site that has, for decades now, not received the level of investment that's needed. It was supposed to be a site that would be funded by the state and the city, but both of them around the turn of the century pulled out funding, both the state and the city, and there's no kind of consistent source of federal funding. So we haven't been able to invest in Linden houses to the extent that residents really deserve. And it's gotten to a point where NYCHA, to really repair your homes to the level that we think are kind of the decent standards that you deserve, it will cost us roughly, or really, over $350 million. So with this need for around $350 million, which is what you might hear us call the P&A, NYCHA went to the federal government, to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, to ask, how can we fund these investments? How can we fund these repairs for apartments, buildings, systems, the sites and grounds? And what they said to us is that we can pursue this conversion, and this conversion over to Section 8. And in doing that, in converting over to Section 8, we're able to kind of access additional forms of federal subsidy, and we can use that subsidy to pay for debt service. And that helps us raise financing to pay for these improvements today, instead of having to wait for the future when we get small increments of capital from the federal government. So based on this feedback from the federal government, we decided to choose Linden Houses as a great site for a conversion over to Section 8. And as I mentioned, converting over to Section 8 is a strategy that really helps us to convert your development to a Section 8 site. And in doing so, in tremendous levels of reinvestment. I'm noticing my screen is a little frozen. Are you able to hear me, Yasmin?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? Okay. Sorry about that. It says Zoom quit.
We can hear you right now.
Okay. Great. So perfect. So as long as you can still hear me. So what the conversion does is it allows us to raise additional funds that helps NYCHA to reinvest in your community. So we went through a competitive process to look at and kind of offer up this opportunity to a lot of different teams and developers, general contractors, property managers. And through that process, we chose the Stanley Avenue Preservation team, who NYCHA believes has the full level of expertise needed to bring these repairs to your site. They're a team that has a tremendous amount of experience and has done this work before. And some important things that we want to emphasize and make sure that all residents are aware of is that as part of this conversion, this remains a publicly subsidized public housing development. So Section 8 is still a subsidy that's coming from the federal government. And with that, and with this Section 8 voucher that you'll be moving over to, you still have really critical tenant rights. So the first and most preeminent tenant right is that your income your rent will not be more than 30% of your income. You will retain the right to kind of succession. There will be access, or you will still have resident rights along the lines of grievance procedures. You will still have the opportunity to organize. If you are a recipient of the earned income disregard, you will continue receiving that. And so these are just some of the tenant rights that I wanted to emphasize at the top of this meeting, just so everyone understands that your rent will not be more than 30% of your income, and there will be no displacement as part of this program. So with that, I want to thank everyone again for joining us here tonight and kick off this meeting so that we can hear from you. So thank you all, and I'll hand it back to Yasmin.
Thank you. Okay, so let's begin. Again, this is the Linden Houses Resident Landscape Design Meeting. But before we start, let's go to the next slide. We want to remind people a little bit about housekeeping. We'd like you to, if you have any questions, by the end of the, I guess, the end of the program, we ask you to either type your question in the chat box or raise your virtual hand at the time of questions and answers. And if you are calling in from your phone, you do that by dialing *9 to raise your hand, and then making sure you dial *6 to unmute. I did not get a chance to make the announcement in regards to translation. Is that the next slide? So can we go back to that next slide? And I would like to allow, prior to that, at this time, I would like to ask our translators to take this time out to assure that there's any needs required here, that they asked about that. Thank you. I think Michelle. Okay, well, I guess we have some technical difficulties. So we'll come back when we are ready to address this slide. And let's start the presentation. Okay, so I think what's important, what we'll try to do at every meeting is we'll just have a recap from the previous meeting. In the last meeting, we gave you introductions. There was a brief summary of what the PAC program was about. We talked about the timeline, pre-development and construction timeline. As you see here, pre-development will be happening between winter and spring 2021. Construction, we expect to happen somewhat between 2021 and 2023. Management transition will probably happen towards things are fluid, so things will probably be happening towards the fall of 2021. And then we expect, hopefully, God willing, that the project completion will be in summer 2023. Why is all this changing? Because as you all know, a lot of things have stopped due to the pandemic, and COVID-19 is still happening. And we are not entering any units at this time, as we've discussed that before. So a lot of things have slowed down. But this is still to give you an idea of what the timeline will look like when it begins. Next slide, please. Also, again, last meeting we discussed about tenant in place construction. No resident will be asked to leave their home during construction when this occurs. However, on-site hospitality units will be available to any resident that does not wish to remain in their unit while work is taking place. The other thing is we talked about construction and COVID safety. We gave you information about how we're seriously taking COVID-19, and that there will be a process for those people who for everybody while we're dealing with COVID safety, that you have to be looking at a plan, acknowledging that plan, and assuring that we are held accountable of your safety as well as our own team and others around us. A question around right sizing came up. Right sizing will only occur, this is during the time period of when we're going through the conversion of Section 8, right? So right sizing will only occur when appropriately sized apartments become available within your development. No resident will be asked to relocate to another NYCHA development due to right sizing. And then there's on-site management and other changes.
Yasmin, I'm so sorry to interrupt. This is Nicole from Geneva Worldwide. Our interpreters weren't able to unmute during that segment, so we've just been granted access for that. So we need them to be able to unmute to announce the language lines.
Okay, so why don't you just go ahead and do that then, Nicole?
They have to do that in their languages. So we need to make sure that they have access to unmute. We don't have that control.
Jenna?
Hi, Nicole. Working on
It's about guests.
Yeah, Arnie, I'll call you when I'm done.
Hello.
So are we ready now?
They should be able to begin.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Everybody's there. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so if this is the interpreter speaking, let's just announce our language lines. We'll begin with Spanish and continue with Mandarin, then Russian, then Cantonese, then Haitian Creole, and then you can go ahead and mute yourselves in this room again.
My Haitian Creole last.
What is it? What is it?
Hello, bonsoir. Merci le fait que nous venions assister à la réunion ça. Nous vraiment contents de gagner nous. Donc, si nous avons temps de réunion ça dans la langue panou qui c'est créole haïtien, nous avons le numéro ça, c'est 646-558-8656. Ensuite, on a composé numéro ça qui c'est 848-608-3704. Donc, ça c'est code pour nous assister à la réunion ça dans créole haïtien langue panou.
Hello, this is Lydia Hao, who is a Mandarin interpreter. I'm going to introduce the My Language Line. 大家好，欢迎今天大家能够晚上参加我们今天的这样的一个居民说明会。那么，如果大家需要国语翻译的，那请拨打我们的电话热线是646-558-8656，646-558-8656。在您拨打完这个电话线以后，请您拨打我们的这个国语的 meeting ID， 国语的会议 ID 是461-857-9342。我再说一下，我们的国语 ID 是461-857-9342。谢谢大家 ，Thank you。
Is there anyone else?
Hello. Can you hear me?
The Russian.
This is the Russian interpreter speaking. Алло, здравствуйте. Если вам требуется перевод на русский язык, пожалуйста, позвоните по номеру 1-646-558-8656. После этого, пожалуйста, введите код собрания. Код собрания 424-911-8034. Я еще раз повторю. Код собрания 424-911-8034. Спасибо.
Okay, the next one. Is there another language? Okay, not hearing none. I'm going to start back again. Is that all right?
Sounds good.
Okay, great.
My apologies.
Yep. So let's take it from there, right? So, okay, let's take it from here. So can you go back one more, please? Right. So we were saying right sizing was part of the recap. Then the other thing we talked about was on-site management and other changes. And so from the meeting, we discussed that on-site management, the team will consist of property managers, superintendents, porters, and security to ensure that residents receive timely repairs and have an increased sense of safety. Additionally, we will be upgrading building entrances, windows, and roofs, as well as heating and ventilation plumbing systems. So those are the types of changes that you'll be seeing as well. Next slide. Will residents be displaced? No, there will not be any displacement of residents under PACT. As part of the HUD program requirements, all residents currently in good standing and on the lease will be able to transition into the Section 8 program. What assurances are in place that will be continual affordability and not market rent? Preserving long-term affordability is built into each step of the PACT conversion process, as you heard from Mr. Lundy. NYCHA maintains ownership of the land and regulatory oversight of the properties. Section 8 protections are built into the residential lease, the transaction documents, and the HUD requirements for the program, which requires that residents pay no more than 30% of their total adjusted gross household income. Will residents have to sign the new lease? So let me explain this slide. Basically, again, if you're just joining us, we're kind of sharing what we heard from the last meeting and reiterating it, so we're all still on the same page. This slide may be different from what you received because we updated more information that we received since we handed out the presentation versus to what we're seeing now. And trust us, we will be posting this new slide up around the site, as well as putting on our website, and we'll be reiterating the same information again and again. But I just thought it was important that as we receive new information and more informed information that we share at this meeting. Again, will residents have to sign a new lease? All households converting to Section 8 will be asked to sign a new Section 8 lease with Stanley Avenue Preservation. Current residents will not need to apply to Section 8. Annual income recertification will be processed by NYCHA's Leased Housing Department. What is HQS? Housing Quality Standards repairs are a requirement of the Department of Housing and Urban Development HUD. You will be hearing more about that once we are able to do in-unit access. What can I do to prepare my household for the conversion? If there are any members of your household who are not part of your household composition, please now reach out to NYCHA Property Management to add them to your household composition. The same applies to any appliances, washers, AC units, or pets. Please also reach out to us with any questions you might have about the conversion and continue to attend these meetings and provide us with your feedback. Thank you. Next slide. So this is something that you'll continuously see again, just reiterating it. What to expect, what will stay the same. Residents continue to pay no more than 30% of their income. NYCHA will still own the land and the buildings. They retain regulatory oversight. The tenant association remains a collaborative. Continuing the tenant participation fund will occur, and residents in good standings will not be evicted. What will change? In-unit and statewide upgrades, including kitchen and bathroom renovations, landscaping and playground improvements, common area upgrades, enhanced security, site-wide cameras and access control. There will be a new on-site management team to meet. I know I'm repeating myself, but I just want to keep saying this because it's very important that everybody's aligned. There'll be a new on-site management team to meet resident needs. There'll be an on-site social service provider. There'll be opportunities for local hiring because of the construction and management. And again, a lot of these meetings that we'll be having, hopefully soon we'll be able to be meeting in person, but a lot of these meetings we'll be having will be addressing each issue. It will not be just an overflow of items. It will be opportunity to learn about each one. So we'll be having a meeting to talk about local hiring. We'll be having a meeting to discuss social service providers. We'll be having a meeting to go over how our apartments and kitchens and bathrooms will change. And we'll be having a meeting to meet the on-site management team. But this meeting tonight, this meeting right here, is to discuss how we will be looking at the design of landscaping improvements, how we'll be looking at how we look at our communities and we see what things could change and what things could stay the same. Next slide. So I think at this time, I think we just did the translation lines. Let me just ask one more time with our translator, project manager first. Should we do this one more time before we move on?
Hi, Yasmin.
Hello.
Hi, Yasmin. I think that's a good idea. Let's do this one more time. And if we can begin with the Spanish interpretation line announcements, let's start with Spanish, Haitian Creole, Russian, Mandarin, and Cantonese. Thank you.
Translators, you all should be able to unmute yourselves. We ask that anyone who is joining, who's not on our team and who is viewing, please take a moment to mute yourself as we can hear your background noise.
Spanish interpreters are responding that they cannot unmute themselves. If they can be promoted to co-host so they can unmute themselves.
On your team is a co-host. Can we start with Cantonese, please? Because I believe they are upgraded.
語翻譯嘅話咧，可以撥打呢個電話646558856，輸入密碼 ID 號碼係83100543。我再重複一次，電話係646558856，輸入嘅密碼 ID 號碼係8310053543。唔該晒。
Spanish next, please.
Hola, buenas noches a todos. Si desean escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor, marquen el número 646-558-8656 y entren el código de reunión 331-425-8640, signo de número. Nuevamente, el número a marcar para interpretación en español es 646-558-8656. Ingresen el código de reunión 331-425-8640, signo numeral. Gracias.
Haitian Creole next, please.
Bonsoir tout le monde et merci le fait que nous venions assister à la réunion ça. Donc, si nous avons besoin de réunion ça en créole haïtien, nous sommes capables d'entrer composer numéro ça qui c'est 646-558-8655. Ensuite, nous sommes capables de mettre le numéro code ça qui c'est 848-608-3704 et nous peser symbole pour numéro 1. Merci en pile.
Russian next, please.
Russian. Если вам нужно послушать данное собрание на русском языке, пожалуйста, позвоните по следующему номеру 646-558-8656. И после этого, пожалуйста, введите код собрания, а именно 424-911-8034. Я повторю. Номер, по которому вы звоните, 646-558-8656. Потом вводите код собрания 424-911-8034 и решеточка. Спасибо.
And Liz, can we have I'm sorry.
Recording in progress.
Cantonese, please.
OK，如果大家咧需要粵語好譯嘅話，請撥打呢個電話係64655886566，輸入 ID 號碼831000353。我重複一次，電話號碼64655886566，輸入嘅 ID 號碼係831000353。唔該晒。
Is that everyone, Michelle? I believe so. Thank you.
Excuse me, this is one of the Haitian Creole interpreters. I'm sorry. There was an error with the numbers from my team. I would like to correct it, please.
Yes, please.
OK. Si vous besoin service interprète en créole haïtien, t'en prie les numéros ça 646-558-8656 et puis wap entrer numéro réunion qui c'est 848-608-3704. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jenna Richardson. Some of you may know me from on site. It's great to see so many familiar faces on video and familiar names in the chat. I just wanted to take a minute to introduce our partners this evening. I do ask again that if you are entering late at this moment, please take a moment to mute yourself as we can all pick up your background noise just to make this more manageable. Thank you so much. So we have partnered with a design firm, which is Linden Architects and Design.
Americans for the pandemic. Well, tonight they say it is still too.
There's someone, thank you so much. The Langdon team is our partners on this project, and so they have come along to this meeting, and they'll be hosting us from here on out to discuss and hear from you what your visions are for the beautiful Linden landscape. And so this is an opportunity. We're going to talk through a few slides, of course, and show some of the things that we've captured on site, but this, we're going to break into some breakout groups after this. And this is really your opportunity. I want to stress this, for you to tell us what Linden means to you and what you envision, right? And how we can work together and how you see your landscape being transformed. So with that, I am going to hand it off to our partners, Michael and John, who will walk us through. Thank you.
Michael, you're on mute.
Michael, you have to start over, Michael. You're on mute.
All right, trying take two. So thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Yasmin. I hope everyone can hear me now. So, and thanks to the entire community at Linden Houses. We really appreciate, as others have said tonight, you taking the time and making yourselves available. We appreciate being in your living room with you as we go through this. My team and the development team have worked hard to try to make this experience as interactive as possible and to mimic as closely as we can what it would be like if we were sitting in one of your meeting rooms on site and doing this as a large group. So just another minute of introduction and then we'll get rolling. I'm joined tonight in this first segment of our presentation by John Carluccio. John will be speaking with me and sharing with you some of our initial observations. John's a landscape architect with Langan, our project manager for the landscape aspects of this. And then later on this evening, you'll hear from a few other of my colleagues. You'll be in a breakout room with either myself or John or one of my partners, Chris Vitellano, who's a civil engineer and is working on other aspects of Linden Houses. Or you will be with one of two other landscape architects from the Langan team, Shiwei Wu, who is a landscape architect who's been working very closely with John on your project, and you may be with Shiwei or with Steve Laudowdy, who's also a landscape architecture project manager at Langan. So as we've said, we're working on your site, and tonight is a very important opportunity for us to hear your feedback. We are just starting the process. No designs have been set, and we're interested in hearing from you. Just a little bit more about Langan. We're a multidisciplinary firm. As I mentioned, we're landscape architects and engineers. We've got offices across the U.S. and abroad. And I would like to think that our group is at the forefront of really creating vibrant living communities. We do a lot of things in terms of project types, dealing with sustainable design issues. Redevelopment is a specialty of ours, and we like to transform the communities and the places we work. Next slide, please. So today's landscape agenda for all to see. John and I will be speaking to you about our approach and objectives. We'll share with you some observations on the context of your community and the existing conditions. And then we'll get into those resident feedback sessions where there will be more of an opportunity for you to interact with the group in that room. We really would like to get your feedback, and we'll come back into this large group room to summarize the feedbacks and for the development team to discuss the next steps. Next slide, please. So here's a graphic that speaks to the approach that we've developed for the overall project. We really think of the entire design process as hinging around three key factors. Number one being the community, where you all live and know so well. Focusing on developing improvements that support well-being in the community. That's very important to us. And we want to define a landscape that is one that is a landscape of inclusion. You can see some colorful graphics in the red and orange about possibilities that you'll hear about later, whether it's community gardens or picnic areas to outdoor exercise facilities, or thinking about seasonal interests, what the grounds look like at various times of year. We'll get into those in more detail, and maybe we can move to the next slide, please. So again, this is all about soliciting feedback from you all so that we can incorporate your preferences into the site planning. We'll be hearing in more detail in a few moments about key topics that we think are interesting and important to you all. One being maintenance and security, looking at aspects like the site lighting, safety and sanitation at Linden houses. We'll be talking about community spaces, places that you gather with your friends and relatives, seating areas on the grounds, community gardens, the flagpole. We've heard a lot about that. We'll be talking about recreation facilities, the various playgrounds and basketball courts, the potential for fitness facilities and things like that. We'll talk about site circulation. It's a fancy word for how you're getting around on the site, right? The walkways, the sidewalks that you use every day, the signage that welcomes you to Linden houses, maybe directional signage and things like that. And then we'll be talking about site aesthetics, what the landscape looks like, the trees, the shrubs, the lawns, and the other vegetation that's present and proposed at your community. Next slide, please. So here's a diagram that we developed. It's a plan view, sort of a bird's eye view of your site. Again, I think you've heard others say, and I'll echo it again, we're starting to look at your community with a design eye and an engineering eye, but the bottom line is no one knows your community better than you. So that's what makes all of the input that we received tonight and after this evening critical. So we've basically, I think you all are familiar, we've got Stanley Avenue at the top of the screen and Corzine at the bottom. You know what building you live in. These are just some initial diagrams. And I think in the right-hand corner of the screen there, you'll see this statement that was compiled with the design team and the development team. Linden Houses benefits really from an expansive outdoor open space with lots of amenities. We tonight hope to learn a lot about what and how you are not using various aspects of the site. Hearing about those special places that are important to you, hearing about those places where you think improvements could be made, and to hear your vision for the future of your community. At this point, I'd like to turn the conversation over to John Carluccio from my team to speak a little bit more about some of the specifics that I touched on earlier. John?
Thank you, Michael. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. My name, again, as Michael said, my name is John, and I will be kind of running us through some images. Obviously, you've seen this plan here, which you're all very well familiar with. So I'm just going to show you some imagery of some of these existing conditions on site. Next slide, please. Just to start, before I get into this first slide, over the past year, it's been over a year now, Langan has become very familiar with the Linden houses landscape. As we move into the design process, we decided to break the site down into different categories to better understand the design. The first one is being maintenance and security. You're all very much familiar with some of these photos, as I'm sure you've seen on campus. Here we have some photos of different types of site lighting, as well as different types of recycling and trash vehicles. So I just wanted to we want your feedback on this. We want to know your opinions, any concerns you might have, anything related to maintenance and security. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the next thing we'll be looking at here are some community spaces and specifically gardens. I'm sure most of you recognize these spaces. We have the 185 Wortman Victory Garden at the upper there. We have the circular garden that is outside. I believe that's outside building 5. Then we have the Memorial Garden with well structure at the bottom left, which is between buildings 9 and 10 along Wortman Avenue. And then we have the community gardens. There are a couple of those existing community gardens, and those are on the backside of building 7 and building 10. I just want to reiterate here that we do not intend to eliminate any of these spaces. We know they're important to residents and they have value, and we just want to let you know that perhaps these spaces can be upgraded, but we do not intend to remove them. Next slide, please. So another portion of community spaces here, community spaces and recreation. We have at the upper left and upper right there, you get different types of benches you guys have on site. We have what look like kind of coffee tables there in green, and different types of benches. We have wood with concrete, have metal ones. So different types of seating, different types of areas to gather, whether to sit alone or to sit in groups. At the bottom left, we have this flagpole, which we see as kind of a gathering space for communities with a significant amount of paved area, as well as a good amount of benches to sit. And then we have playgrounds here. You have multiple playgrounds around the site. This is just one of them, and we know that they have different types of equipment, and we're looking to you to see how can these areas be upgraded. We want to hear about different seating, again, different ideas around this flagpole, and then just ways that we could that would draw you out to use these spaces more. Next slide, please. And finally here, we're looking at site aesthetics, which we're focusing here on landscape and vegetation. I've been to the site a number of times, and I've noticed that you all have very beautiful mature trees. You can see here from the photo in the upper left that it was a warm day when I was there, and I was very appreciative of all the shade. So it's really nice to see, and it really adds value to the campus. And I just saw it as a great starting point for the landscape to have such quality trees and such a great kind of canopy over your head as you roam through the space. You know, we do see that you have a lot of shade trees, but we don't see a lot else as far as kind of different seasonal items, different colors, interest. And that's just one item here. You can see at the bottom left that outside of next to the sitting spaces you saw earlier that we have some evergreen planting. But you know, maybe we can improve the planting a little bit and kind of accentuate different entrances and kind of use plants to do that. Again, we also want to be conscious of security and to make sure that people still feel safe and there's no areas for people to hide or lurk in. So that wraps up what is the larger portion of our presentation. Next, we will be moving into smaller breakout sessions with myself, Michael, or one of the other colleagues that Michael mentioned. I don't know if there was anything that Yas or ownership wanted to mention.
No, thank you, John, for that. I am going to open the breakout rooms, but I just wanted to explain. I think we just did translation lines, so no need to go through that again. So for everyone who is joining on their computer, if this is your first time in a breakout room, what you will see on your screen is saying you've been invited to go to a breakout room. And all you have to do is simply press yes, and it'll sort you into that room. In this space, we'll be going through these questions, and you'll be able to unmute yourselves. You'll be able to utilize the chat at this time to voice your opinion and to share with us everything that we've been asking for. We will be in our breakout rooms for about 20 minutes, and you will be matched with a Langan team member as well as a Stanley Avenue team member for management. We ask that you take this time to voice your opinions on the landscape and moving forward. If you have questions, I know some of us are hearing a lot of information for the first time. So if you have questions more so about the overall project, we have our contact information at the end of this screen, and it will also be up in the breakout rooms, and it will be up again at the end of the meeting. So we ask that you hold questions that are not landscape related and reach out to us directly, or you can drop your information in your breakout group and we will contact you after. I see people are still joining, and so they'll go into the breakout room.
Hey Jenna, what happens if you are not on the computer and you're calling in? How do you go into a breakout room?
Great question. So on your phone, it will just say the host is putting you in a breakout room. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to press any buttons. You'll probably hear a moment of silence, and then you'll be in a breakout room, and a recorded voice will say, you are now in breakout room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you're on the phone, no worries. This should be seamless for you. Those who are on their computer or tablet, please just opt in, okay? So I'm gonna head and
one more thing. If you're on the phone and you have the presentation in front of you, the page that says resident feedback sessions, those questions are the questions that you'll be asked to opine or to discuss. Okay, so if you're on the phone, that page that says what are
you cut out, but you're back.
Oh, the questions that say what are some of your favorite features, what are some areas of concern, what new landscape features, that page is the page that you should be looking at once you get into your breakout room. So there you go. Please continue, Jenna.
No worries. Thank you for that. And if you don't get a chance to voice your opinion in these breakout rooms, 20 minutes is a little tight. Please take this opportunity to reach out to us with this information. Everyone's voice and everyone's opinion is super important to us in informing these decisions. So please take this as an opportunity to knock on our door or swing by or give us a call, okay?